Welcome to Hard Knock Life. I'm Keith Chow.
Hi, I'm Dominic WarRock.
It's just the two of us this week. How's it going, Dominic?
It's going all right, Keith.
It feels like the spring of 2020 all over again, doesn't it?
How so?
Just me and you doing a podcast?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I like the four dudes format. I was extra conscious the last couple podcasts that it was four dudes talking about stuff.
Yeah.
But we're gonna change that up, I assume, with some guests at some point.
Oh, for sure. We definitely don't want it to just be four guys on a podcast. That's problematic in its own right. But there's a lot of things to talk about this week. We should probably do our weekly WandaVision recap because we're nearing the end of that show.
Yeah.
Just let's start off with the thing we've been starting off every episode for the last few weeks. What was your take on the most recent episode of WandaVision?
Well, I mean, watch out. Monica's got blue eyes now to fight the magical red eyes. I'm sorry I can't let this go, but the red eyes thing was so dumb in the black and white.
And then
video.
I think, doesn't Monica's blue eyes shine? Oh, no, Agatha's purple eyes came through in the black and white this time. I don't know if you noticed that.
I think something like that happened. I guess, it's established in the language now, so I'm letting go of that part of it. But, in the shorthand of, color theory super battles, she's got the blue eyes to fight the red eyes. That's how we know she's a good superhero in this scenario.
Well, which is interesting because Agatha's eyes are purple, and if we're taking the political colors of red versus blue, Agatha's clearly set up to look like the villain at the end of... Oh, spoilers for WandaVision, by the way.
Yeah.
Agatha looks to be the villain the way they set up her kind of intro song at the end, but if you're saying Wanda is the villain, Monica's the hero, is Agatha the swing state?
Is Agatha the swing state? I don't know. I mean, just from the comic book origins, I believe Agatha Harkness was kind of a swing character. She was known as just a enigmatic figure of mystical power in the Fantastic Four section of the universe, was she not? I mean,
yeah, she was Franklin Richards' nanny.
Oh, okay. I mean, she was just a little creepy, much like,
I don't think,
Captain
she was never
successfully
fully a villain, right? She wasn't twirling a mustache.
Yeah.
She was petting a kitten, but not twirling a mustache.
Yeah, she has all these indicators of sort of classic, let's say, the stereotypical witch imagery. And it'll be interesting how far they go with this when she's facing off with the Scarlet Witch, who was never called the Scarlet Witch, how much they go with the, classic witch tropes on this one. But I also have to take a minute just to say that Catherine Hahn is just great.
Yeah.
And, this being her second go as a Marvel villain, we have deep fondness for her portrayal of that Dr. Octopus in the Spider-Verse movie. So we'll see how this plays out.
Which is interesting is if the whole purpose of WandaVision is that it opens up the multiverse and brings in all of these other versions of Marvel characters. Could it not open up the Spider-Verse? Could we not see Catherine Hahn's Dr. Octopus in the MCU?
I really think that's where they're going. I mean, they will have to get over the animation live action wall, but also that's not,
But maybe not.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
and as we know from Tom and Jerry movie, that's not a wall that can't be overcome either. So, I mean, I just say that because, the style of that Dr. Octopus was particularly great in animation.
And her reveal was great in the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
When you realize that the Doctor was Dr. Octopus all along.
Yeah.
And this was Agatha all along. Speaking of villain reveals and hero reveals, two major things happen in this episode of WandaVision that people predicted before the show even launched, right? Monica Rambeau would come fully into her superhero persona, and Catherine Hahn was going to be playing Agatha Harkness. Those are two things that people kind of guessed before the show started. To me, it was still thrilling to see it fully realized during the episode, even though I knew as soon as Monica was like, I'm going to push myself through the barrier.
Yeah.
Even when she took her spacesuit off and was wearing basically a photon costume underneath.
Yeah.
It was still thrilling when it happened.
Yeah. I mean, that was fun because, again, there was a little fidelity to her comic book's origin. I mean, not that that's important. Not that, getting comic books accurate is so important. But I just have personal sentimental feeling towards it because I actually had that issue of Spider-Man where Monica Rambeau, Captain Marvel, first starts. And it's something very similar. She has to break through an interdimensional power barrier of some form. And she emerges on the other sides with all these energy powers. And so there was something fun about that. And she's almost got a costume. And one of the other fun things about Monica Rambeau Captain Marvel is like she's ridiculously overpowered. Like in theory, she should just be turning into a laser every time and just killing you. I mean, we know superheroes don't usually do that, right. But she has much more than the usual brute force we're used to seeing even in standard Captain Marvel.
Well, and even in the episode, she's quite powerful because she's the only person who's able to not only break through the barrier unscathed, but it's intimated that she can actually see the photon waves of whatever energy is being used to create the hex.
Yeah.
Because you get to see like her Matrix Neo POV of the hex when she breaks through. And she's able to also retain herself, unlike anyone else or anything else that goes through the barrier. It becomes part of the, sitcom universe. And she's able to retain her consciousness and her own physical form. So that's hinting that she's going to be quite a powerful force in the MCU going forward.
She's got a 5-star ninja relationship with energy manipulation in the Captain Marvel tradition, which is great. I mean, for me, still, like, part of me wishes in an alternate universe this show was from Monica's perspective. I mean, I know, like, I get the sense you're still more into this show than I am. I'm still, like, thinking of the version where it starts where she's resuscitating, or she's coming back to life in the hospital, and she gets to investigate all these things and discover the WandaVision world from the outside. But that's not the one that's to be.
That's not the show you got. Well, but at least it sounds like she's going to have a major part in the next Captain Marvel movie. I mean, I think you were a fan of the first Captain Marvel movie, correct?
Oh yeah, I'm big into the first Captain Marvel movie. Isn't everybody? Not really.
I don't know how. I think in the pantheon of Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't know where Captain Marvel ranks for most folks. I think it's generally, if it's not in the bottom half, it's probably generally in the middle for most people, I think.
That's interesting. I mean, for me, it's like the second or third.
Oh, wow.
Of all the Marvel achievements.
I shouldn't speak for most people. For me, let's just say.
Yeah.
For me, it's in the middle part of the 20-some-odd Marvel movies.
And I sort of understand why people have mixed feelings about it. I mean, some people have very strong...
Well, yeah, let's not count the misogynists who hate it just because it's a woman.
Right. I mean, yeah, there is that. There was this huge misogynistic wave against it, and that was all misplaced. And I think a lot of it had to do with people like freaked out by like, oh, a white woman and black women are best friends and the heroes. I find it great for many sentimental reasons, which will probably tie into things we're going to talk about in this show related to the music and the sort of 90s like area of it.
I think the one thing I think it was less successful at was, for me at least, evoking the 90s aesthetic. Like, I didn't feel it as faithful to like a 90s period piece as it could have been.
Sure, okay.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough. Well, for me, that was mainly brought out by the music.
I think some of the music choices worked, some of them didn't for me.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, not all of us adore garbage in the same way, Keith. Right? I mean the band Garbage, not literal garbage.
I think it effectively used the Courtney Love song. Right? Wasn't there a whole song at one point?
I mean, Celebrity Skin happens at the end.
I think the No Doubt song was a little on the nose.
That was a bit much, but in a way that I just loved it. Like a wedding.
I bring up Captain Marvel because, from all accounts, the sequel, the follow-up, is going to be about, like, the several generations of Captain Marvel, right? Like, it's bringing in Monica Rambeau, it's bringing in Kamala Khan. It's directed by Nia DaCosta, which is fascinating. So, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of Captain, I don't hate Captain Marvel. It's not, like I said, it's not in my bottom tier, but it's not in my top tier of the MCU either. But as far as anticipation goes, Captain Marvel 2 is probably, for me, the most anticipated upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Especially now seeing how they're doing Monica Rambeau.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited for the Ms. Marvel show.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see all of them in one movie.
Yeah, no, it'll be really exciting. I mean, it's a lot of time. We don't know what sort of conflicts they'll develop for the characters leading up to that time. But just the idea of those three women intersecting is great. And yes, I'm also very excited for the Ms. Marvel show. I'm particularly excited how they're going to do the stretchy powers, because the stretchy powers is something they haven't quite nailed on screen yet. And that would be a benchmark like the Spider-Man web-swinging powers was. Yeah, I mean, it's something they just haven't quite embraced fully yet, or got it to play, and it's her whole deal. Miss Marvel is, and she sort of gives herself super strength by like giving herself more mass, but I don't know, we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I can't wait. I think Miss Marvel is going to be a great show. I'm really looking forward to, like, there isn't an MCU Disney Plus show that I'm not excited about. In fact, the one I'm probably the least excited about is Falcon and Winter Soldier. Like, that's the one that feels a little...
Looks a little bro-ish.
Yeah, a little bit just too down middle of the road, kind of like milk toasty of all of them, really. It's like straight up like action show. But Loki looks fascinating. The What If show looks fascinating. Hawkeye looks great. Like, I'm very excited for Hailee Steinfeld as Kate Bishop.
Oh, yeah. No, me too, also. It looks like it'll have the vibe of that... Is it the Matt Fraction series?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Although I don't know how much like Jeremy Renner evokes the Matt Fraction Hawkeye for me, but Pizza like Dog's in it.
He doesn't. So right.
That's all I need.
Yeah. No, they're really selling that dog. The dog is going to appear in the video game too. Are you saying that Jeremy Renner doesn't seem like sort of a schlubby apartment like landlord type?
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. I just like his whole demeanor in the movies doesn't feel like the Matt Fraction version of Clint Barton, Maybe it's just because
fair enough.
They wrote him as like a family man who lives on a farm instead of like is it Hell's Kitchen he lives in, or that's
a good question.
Where does he live in New York City? But he just doesn't give off that New York City vibe, especially again because he in the MCU dude lives on a farm upstate, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
But WandaVision's almost over. I mean, you're still watching it every
What do you
week.
think is going to happen?
Well, the other reveal is the whole Agatha Harkness thing. And I think they leaned in so much to the villain part that I don't know that she's playing the villain. I still think there are other forces. I don't think it's Mephisto. I think everyone's assuming it's Mephisto.
Yeah, they can get by without a big... Everyone's just assuming that there's a big villain reveal because that fits the form of like, oh, we need to have this big Thanos build-up, right? Mm-hmm. We don't even know that there is... Yeah, right. Teasing the final boss in the very first of this phase. We don't know that's going to happen.
Yeah. I hope not that Wanda is the villain, to your point earlier. I hope what the villain is like grief. You know what I mean? Like what she ultimately has to overcome in the final battle is her own grief.
Sure.
Anything else I think will be too rote, like if she has to overcome Hayward or like Mephisto shows up or even Baron Mordo from Doctor Strange shows up,
Maybe there's some final sitcom genre that she just has to fight. I don't know what the final sitcom genre would be.
Well, they've made it to the 2010s. There isn't there isn't an innovation beyond like the Office Modern Family that they already did last episode. So
true. Maybe it's just the finale itself, or binging,
or reunion episode, maybe.
Yeah, or episode. Yeah. Right, no, I mean, again, that kind of goes back to why it's not quite landing with me, because I thought Avengers Endgame did a good job of spending the first couple hours on really processing the tragedy, which I thought was an unusual structural move, but also very effective. WandaVision I still just find weird, man.
That's why I'm actually, like, anything post-Endgame for me has felt, less important, honestly. Like, I think we said this last year, but Endgame feels like such a finale to the MCU that like anything that comes after feels less fulfilling, even though I said I'm very excited for, and I am excited for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I don't feel like it's going to be as important as a cultural thing for me after Endgame, right? Like it's like when your favorite show has a finale, but there's like a spin-off coming out next season, then you're less excited about the spin-off because your show just ended, But it could be great. It could be Better Call Saul, which I don't really watch. But like, if you're a huge Breaking Bad fan, which I was very excited for Better Call Saul. And then I watched like the first season and never came back to it. So.
Okay, well.
I mean, I hear it's great, but it just didn't catch me the way, Jesse and Walt did. Anyway, I don't know. That's a weird analogy, I guess, but...
It works.
So that's it for WandaVision. Let's transition to the distinguished competition, because the other thing that came out this week that we didn't get a chance to talk about last week was the trailer for the Snyder Cut. So we finally got to see 2.5 minutes worth of Zack Snyder's vision for a 4-year-old movie at this point.
But that's gonna be a 4-hour version. Like, it's just a really long movie. We'll need a slightly different word for it, like a movie lift. It's like extra-sized movie that's coming out.
I mean, it was supposed to be like a mini series, and now it's like the Snyder Cut is. It was started out as a movie, then it became like it's actually 4-hour-long episodes, and now it's a 4-hour movie. To risk like shitting on things that we don't want to shit on, because that seems to be wherever we head when we talk about the Snyderverse. What were your initial impressions of the Justice League trailer? At least there was no Leonard Cohen song this time. That was one thing.
Yeah, there was no big pretentious song. There was some kind of pretentious chanting motif. I went back and watched the original Justice League movie trailer back when the song was like a really rocked out Beatles come together. And it was pretty much the same vibe. I'm still gonna watch the shit, obviously, although I didn't get any big new information out of it apart than this sort of questionable Joker tease, which I'm sure we're coming to in a moment. What were your impressions?
Well, my impression, Dominic, is we live in a society.
Yeah, that's really all you gotta say. That's all I should have said. My impression was we live in a society.
That was my big takeaway. This goes back to something that you and I were talking about before we started recording. Is this like the internet culture of trolling for the sake of trolling? And like sometimes it doesn't matter if someone's trolling or not. It's really just the reaction, rather whether they're being sincere or they're shit posting, basically. And the whole "we live in a society" meme encompasses all of that, right?
Sure.
Like it started as something I think quite sincere from like a dark corner of the internet, right? Like the incel-y kind of, no one understands who I am, and it's because of society that I must, murder people.
Couched in a sort of stereotypical Joker speech that could be from, a cheesy TV show.
Then it became kind of like people would use that meme to basically dunk on the people who were being sincere about that meme. And now it's kind of come full circle. And I guess I say all that to say, like, I don't know if Zack Snyder having Jared Leto say the line in the movie is like a sincere, like Zack Snyder go, oh, the fans want this, I'm going to give this to the fans because I do everything for the fans. Or it's his version of like trolling people. I don't know. That's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter.
Well, you can't know. And because as you just laid out, I still find the meme kind of funny, by the way. Personally, I just think "we live in a society" is a funny meme. But it reinforces itself because it is essentially the corny Joker speech from a DC movie. So it's perfectly plausible that he would be saying that.
Right.
The memes have just added like different layers of interpretation, but if you're asking yourself, well, did he stick that in there for some like secret reason? No, he can just have that because that's the kind of thing Joker says in that movie.
Sure.
So he's just highlighting it in the trailer to try to play to a bunch of different demographics, I think. None of this, getting away from the fact that it's still just a corny thing for anyone to say. If he'd just said "we live in a society ... cut to
fade to black.
The animation, that would have been notable. That would have been a direct reference to something. But like they just like says the
right, because there's actual words after it, right? He says like we live in a society where truth doesn't matter, or something. Right,
the most cliched sort of villain, like no honor in our times or some bullshit like that. Like that is
that's where you get, like, for me at least, I get confused. It's like, wait, is he doing this like from the heart? Like, does he really think he's being profound? And that's the knock against Snyder, and like not just Snyder, but like that certain kind of filmmaker, right? Like the overly pretentious, a lot of gravitas in what is essentially like, immature things. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
It's the Christopher Nolan problem, right? Like like if you really just like read the words, like read the description of like a movie like Tenet or Inception, like, what if things moved backwards? Or like, what if you could like go inside someone else's dream? Like, it sounds like childish, but like he finds a way to make this like grandiose, actors speaking their lines with all this gravitas about like, what if the bullet goes backwards in my gun?
Yeah.
And I realize I just shot on Snyder and Nolan. So please, all your hate mail go to Dominic Ma.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Keith. Because we're clearly the same guy. Yeah, no, I think, to be fair, like, Nolan's a little bit a little bit better with his
actual filmmaking.
sort of, well, just his pretentious overtures. You know, he tries to elaborate on his big ideas.
Yeah, and I don't mean to shit on I don't mean to shit on Snyder. Like, I like Nolan better as a filmmaker, but I understand both are like heads of cults of personality on the internet, especially, that is off-putting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I also think we've gone way too far in letting it become branded as Zack Snyder's Justice League, and for that, I mean, for me, that may be the biggest crime of the movement, just specifically requesting the Snyder Cut, because it just made me think, like, the cool thing about these superhero characters is that we've seen them through many writers and creative artists over time. They aren't any one dude's character. It's the closest you would say it was like Stan Lee's Spider-Man for a time. But the absolute
Steve
coolest
Ditko would have some words
yeah,
about
but you would
that.
say that. Right. But yeah, and you might think, you know, Claremont's X-Men were definitive, but then there's a whole era where like some of the best X-Men issues were written by Larry Hama. Anyway, this just to say, I think the absolute coolest thing about them is that they live through years and years under different writers, you know, influence.
Yeah.
And so, like, this whole thing of, like, having to say the Snyder Cut over and over again, like he's delivering some definitive version of the Justice League. Jesus Christ, man. Like, we don't, you know, we didn't really like Whedon's version. We don't have to like Snyder's version. And guess what? There'll be more versions to come still, because that's how these characters work.
You're right. And that's kind of why I made my peace with, like, the DC movie universe, especially because they shifted course and decided, well, we're going to embrace the multiverse. We're going to embrace multiple directors' interpretations of these characters instead of adhering to one person's vision. Like, you know, we were talking about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think one of the reasons why I feel like Endgame is the natural ending point for me is that, like, that was essentially Kevin Feige's run. I'm actually down for, like, other people's takes on these characters now. Like, I don't feel compelled to see, like, where Kevin Feige takes X-Men, Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. You know what I mean? Like, as much as exciting as that is for a lot of people, to me, it's less so, just because it's like everything conforming to the Marvel style over time is not as exciting as it could have been if you had, like, all these wildly different takes. And I feel like, to DC's credit, they've decided that we're not going to just let one guy dominate the style and tone of our films. We're going to open it up so that we can get an Andy Muschietti's Flashpoint movie. We can get a, you know, Dwayne Johnson's Black Adam movie. We can get, you know, a Teen Titans Go movie. Yeah. Matt Reeves' Batman. You know, like, we can get all these different kinds of versions of these characters and still coexist with, like, the DC shows on the CW and the shows on HBO Max. Like, that's what I'm excited about. And I think part of the problem has always been we do develop these cults of personality around one guy, right? Like, if you're a Marvel stan, you worship at the altar of Kevin Feige.
Yeah, that's our weird celebrity thing.
Right. And if you're a DC stan, you worship at the altar of Zack Snyder. And I think in both cases, there lies problems, right? Like, speaking of Zack Snyder, like, the whole release the Snyder Cut movement has now morphed into restore the Snyderverse. You know? Okay, now that's
that's a bit much. There is no Snyderverse, okay? I'm just gonna say that right here.
Well, but the new big thing is that, like,
I mean, there is one, but it's one of
it's one of many, right? But the whole big thing is, like, you know, get people to, like, if we can break HBO Max when the movie comes out on March 18th, and they can see just how important this film is to the history of cinema, they will then reverse course, and now we will have a restoration.
Oh god, that sounds way too much like Make America Great Again, even though we don't know what America Greatness was.
There's, like, a religiosity to, like, the way certain fans hold up, and speaking of sounding like MAGA, on both sides, right? Like, the Marvel stans who hold up the MCU as this, like, paragon of entertainment, and then the DC stans who hold up Snyder's vision as, like, the definitive. I mean, and Snyder, he believes his own bullshit is the problem, right? Because he came out saying he's going to do the definitive version of King Arthur. And it's like, how is there a definitive version of King Arthur, right? Like,
the definitive version of King Arthur.
You know, he's going to do the most authentic King Arthur movie. It's
after, like, that one that was so definitive, you based all your filmmaking around it, Excalibur. Yeah, these things come in cycles, man. Artists, sometimes you're just a vessel for the. I mean, we're getting away from the conversation about work for hire and, like, you know, artists owning their own intellectual property. But yeah, anyway, just there is no Snyderverse, or there's a bunch of loosely, badly planned out DC movies, kind of hardly connected by Harley Quinn, I'll say, who overlaps into like Suicide Squad verse and also Birds of Prey verse and also in Batman in different ways.
Well, but that's the thing. Like, you know, I mentioned Andy Muschietti's The Flash movie. What I find so exciting about that film is that it's going to be like, you know, I think I've talked about it a few times on the podcast. It's going to be that intersection between whatever DC extended universe that started with Man of Steel and tie into all of the other kinds of like movie verses, right? Like, because Michael Keaton's returning as Bruce Wayne for Flashpoint. They just announced they've cast a Supergirl, which was really exciting. An actress named Sasha Calle, who was a actress on a soap opera called Young and the Restless. She's going to be the first Latinx Supergirl.
You cast a Supergirl. Fascinating.
Yeah. So, like, but, you know, and because the Flash movie is about multiverses, maybe she's Henry Cavill's cousin. Maybe she's somebody else's cousin. Who knows? But sure. Again, I'm very excited about opening up the worlds and not having to adhere to one person's idea for these characters. And I feel that way about Marvel. Like I said, like, what's cool about some of the Marvel movies coming up is that they're allowing different types of directors do them and not having to adhere to one particular house style. And I find that fast. Like, that's what set Ryan Coogler apart from most of the, like, I couldn't name, other than the Russos, I couldn't name like 3 directors post Jon Favreau of a Marvel movie. You know what I mean?
Sure, they have to adhere to formula to an extent, and some of them find meaningful ways to deviate from it and some don't. Yeah, I just want to add, I have been thinking about the Joker a little bit recently, sort of in the context of our lives, because like you know, a lot of this pandemic stuff was so overwhelmingly terrible, it wasn't really funny, but it was almost Joker funny, if you know what I mean.
The like pandemic?
Yeah, no, I mean, it fit into the Joker's aesthetic of mountingly terrible human tragedies being, oh, this is sort of like a farce of, you know,
sure,
human frailty.
He is an agent of chaos.
Yeah, and I still haven't seen that, you know, freaking Joker movie, but I understand, like, when the essential parts of his character are, the one essential ideas of Joker is, like, a guy who
lives in a society.
Well, a guy who lives in a society where he is not funny. A guy who's not funny who really wants to be funny. I mean, I think that's the most poignant aspect of it. Anyway, I'm sort of going off on the weird thread here, but getting back to, I am genuinely worried about seeing the Joker bit if it involves brutalizing Batman's friends and companions in the hands of the Zack Snyder verse. Mm-hmm. I'm honestly probably don't want to really see that because to me, like, the brutalization of, like, Batgirl and Jason Todd are, like, 2 of the most genuinely disturbing parts of the Batman story. And there's some allusion to, like, the idea that the Joker is returned to this Justice League cut to sort of amp up the pure evil and, you know, some wanton violence and brutality. And I have concerns about that.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
No, it makes a ton of sense. I mean, that's kind of also why, like, the whole stinger of the trailer, like, on one hand, it was hilarious because, like, they referenced a meme on the internet. But, you know, the origins of that internet meme come from, like, the darkest corners of the internet, right? Like 4chan and, like, a breeding ground for, like, incel-y, gamer-gator-y, comics-gator-y kind of cultures, right? Like, yeah.
And to some degree, the fan impulse is like, let's get an R rating, let's get hard violence, all that shit.
Right. And I mean, even the to your point, the glorification of the Joker as a character stems from a lot of that kind of, like, proto-material of edgelordiness, right? Like, shit posting is a very Joker-y thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, it kind of, like, having the Joker be so prominent in the marketing. And I don't want to sound like a prude that's like, well, you shouldn't glorify the Joker. But, like, there's a kind of like a dog whistle almost to, like, certain kinds of fans in a way that is careful, thin line that you have to watch when you do kind of try to, for the sake of being edgy, glorify a terrible character.
And I just where there might be some gratuitous act of Joker-y violence, and then it turns out to be a really long Batman dream. I mean, that's the other totally plausible thing. The whole thing could just be like a really long Batman dream.
I mean, it looks like it's set in the whole post-apocalyptic vision from the first Batman, Superman.
And then he just wakes up in the Whedonverse. No, not really. But he wakes up and it's the same exact movie.
That's the other thing is like how different, even because like to your point, when you watch the trailers back to back, you do realize like how different could like the stories gotta be pretty much the same. You know, it's the Batman assembles a bunch of superheroes to combat Steppenwolf. Yeah. Maybe you have 3 or 4 more shots of Darkseid, and you have to resurrect Superman. Like, how different?
Oh yeah, the story's gonna be the same. It's gonna be more of everything. I mean, that freaking movie was cut down to like 90 minutes, like a tasty little snack of that. You know, the theatrical cut. I'm speaking.
Right.
Of.
This is 100% more Justice League movie.
Yeah, there's gonna be a lot more Cyborg for one thing, which is fine.
Yeah,
didn't get any sense of him. She'll transform into more things, and yeah.
Well, speaking of Cyborg, the other cool DC thing this week, I wish Sean was here to talk about this. He wrote an amazing post on the Nerd's Color about the most recent Teen Titans Go episode.
Very enlightening.
Featuring
context the whole thing.
Plugs 1, 2, and 3, De La Soul themselves.
Yeah.
How awesome was... I mean, it wasn't just like cartoon renderings of De La Soul. Like De La Soul voicing their own characters. And the plot about a monster... may or may not have been named Tommy, absconding away with their music, which is, for backstory, you should first read Sean's primer on De La Soul and their battle with their record label. But the gist is essentially, because their first 3 albums, iconic 3 Feet High and Rising, De La Soul's Dead, Balloon Mind State, are not available anywhere on streaming because the record labels don't have the capacity or the time or the care to clear the samples in those albums, and so they've absconded with, just like the big orange monster, with De La Soul's masters, and De La Soul can't get them back. Hopefully this show and the like the hype around it brings some more attention to their plight. But as a music aficionado, Dominic, what did you think of this particular episode of Teen Titans?
Oh, the Teen Titans episode with De La Soul was the best thing this whole year, definitely. And I mean, before we get like deep in all the details, you know, interestingly, as directed by Sean Spiess, I found that those first 2 albums are on YouTube Music in some form. I don't know if that's just like a special rule, like Google/YouTube Music gets to, you know, control everything because everything's on YouTube anyway. I don't know what's going on there.
Well, but even if it is, De La is not making any money off of those songs.
Yes, right. Yeah, not necessarily. But anyway, yeah, they were freaking great in that in that episode. I mean, they had the freaking 45 throwing stars and like the, you know, the mic voice amplifying yo attack, like sort of like the voice weapons in Dune, and I don't know. And they also made fun of the Justice League, which is something we love to do on this show. So really, it brought together all the themes. And they went to Mars briefly. You know, sorry, you know, spoilers, but like the other cool thing, like, is you don't go to Teen Titans Go for the plot. Like, there's a formula. Like, you're not going in to be like immersed in, like, you know, did you find out something about the plot continuity is not the big thing.
Are you a big Teen Titans Go fan? Like, have you watched other episodes of Teen Titans, or was this your intro into that little micro universe?
Not recently, but in the course of finding this episode, I got to revisit a bunch of other episodes, and that show is just great.
It is so great. Like, talking about like toxic fans, I still to this day cannot understand the negative backlash this show gets, because if anything, this show caters to like hardcore DC fans. Like the references and the jokes. Like,
yeah,
in every episode. I mean,
like,
if you don't know
that one
anything,
where they fight frickin' Rainbow Raider. I mean, that's just classic.
If you know zero about the DC universe, like, half that shit goes over your head. But like, it's a deep abiding love for the DC universe that they're able to like do the jokes that they do. And I just never understood why the show gets all the hate that it gets on the internet, other than people want their DC superheroes to be dark and edgy. And they make fun of that too on the show all the time.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was so delighted by revisiting those Teen Titans Go episodes that I actually wound up watching Titans just because I wanted to see it. It's because I'd never actually watched before. And that was like fascinating in a completely other way. I mean, that Titans show is like so gratuitously bloody and Mortal Kombat-ish.
Yeah.
Like, the question of who it's for is, like, an incredibly fascinating question, because it's also ridiculously faithful with the costumes. Like, that Hawk and Dove costume are way more faithful than they need to be. So it's, like, a very confusing show.
Yeah.
Whereas Teen Titans Go knows itself. I mean, it's on Cartoon Network, and it's in the title, teen. So I guess it's pretty obvious, like, what demographic it is suitable for. And it's hilarious.
But that's the thing, too. It's like any classic Warner Brothers cartoon, even though it's ostensibly for children, a lot of the jokes in Teen Titans Go is for adults, too, right? Like, it's not,
Yeah.
It's a lot of, like, toilet humor, yes, and
there's
like,
an awful lot of farting.
A lot of farting.
And I'm unclear whether that's a kid joke or an adult joke. Maybe that's universal.
That's universal.
Okay.
But yeah, like, how Bugs Bunny would speak on multiple levels depending on how old the audience was. It still worked for children, but if you were an adult, like Pinky and the Brain, Animaniacs, like all those like really kind of like smart, real edgy humor works, and not edgy for edgy's sake, And I think that's what sets Teen Titans Go apart from like something like Titans or the extended universe, right? Like I don't know. I think it's one of the greatest things like DC Multimedia does.
And they're also really clever and joyful about their musical interludes.
Yeah.
And this was like, a pinnacle example of that. And I think it's nice because it only happens now and then that our pop music fandoms and our comic book fandoms get to coexist in the same place. Like, I'm not saying it never happens because, like, Into the Spider-Verse comes to mind, or I would also argue Captain Marvel and Luke Cage all have, like, the pop songs are like a living character in the story. But otherwise it's pretty much score music. But in this case, like, it was sort of the fantasy of that musical superhero episode. I did have a weird technical thing where it seemed to break YouTube TV in that I watched it once and then I couldn't find it again. It kept skipping past it.
YouTube TV is basically like cable, right? Where you're watching like Cartoon Network live.
Yes, that's the one that's like cable, and it's more like $60 a month instead of $10 or $15.
It was really weird because Cartoon Network, the day of the premiere of that particular episode, basically, if you looked on the cable guide, that episode was like 8 hours long.
Yes, that's what happened. And yet it wasn't that episode. You had the same thing, right?
It was 1,000 Teen Titans episodes back to back to back to back. Yeah, I don't know what that was about. It was like some weird scheduling thing.
But yeah, it tricked out the TV guide, which is only notable at all because I was wondering, because Sean put in my head, whether it was due on some level to the copyright stuff it was talking about. It's probably too much of a coincidence. I think it's probably more true that just like the 12-minute episode length somehow tricks out.
No, but that's the thing. At least typically, like the cable guide that I watch on, it tracks the individual episodes. And so it actually didn't even record because I'm old school. I still have like straight up cable with a DVR and everything.
Sure. So it did the same thing on that, but
yeah, I typically have my DVR set to record new episodes of Teen Titans, and it didn't record this one. So like even though it didn't even record, it wasn't set as a new episode for some reason, and it was 8 hours long. And so like I was like, because I went to go watch it and I couldn't because it didn't record because for some reason it wasn't marked as a new episode. And it tripped me out too. So yeah,
that's a little mysterious, isn't it?
I don't know why Cartoon Network did. That's a mystery wrapped in an enigma that we should try to figure out.
Yeah, maybe we can get Sean's consults on that. But also, I don't know if you find that it does ever record that episode, if it somehow doesn't let you watch it twice, and mysteriously lets you watch every other episode before and after of. And I mean, of Teen Titans Go, I can watch basically every episode on demand except that one.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they have some action going on with the music because it is a form of streaming.
True.
But anyway, again, this could just all be nothing, and I'm having that, I'm partially having that millennial TV issue of, oh my god, I heard about something 1 minute ago and I can't watch it instantly. Oh my god, what's happening? Something must be broken.
You're supposed to be able to stream it on the Cartoon Network app, so I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see.
But anyway, a classic of the genre.
Yeah.
Teen Titans meets De La Soul. Best thing happened since Teen Titans... or best thing De La Soul collaboration since they teamed up with Teenage Fan Club in that one sample heavy song from Judgment Night. But anyway, that was my
that's a throwback.
Obscure musical reference.
Anyway, we're going to put a wrap on it there. What is nerd popping for you this week?
What's nerd popping? Well, I don't know. Just to get back to the Joker thing, there's this is not like there's one line that Joker has in one of the Arkham video games. I don't remember which one. I've been replaying all of them. Where, Batman's mowing down Joker's henchman and Joker's on the PA. And I can't do the Hamill Joker voice, but he says basically, he's making you idiots look like fools. And that was a line that I revisited this week and made me laugh again and again in that Joker way. He's making you idiots look like fools. And I think in some ways that nicely sums up how I feel about this whole Snyderverse controversy. Okay, like we're already kind of idiots for like loving these comic book characters so much, and the fact we're getting worked up again because of a particular iteration of it is making idiots into fools. So we're all just fools together. What very well said, Joker. What's nerd popping for you, Keith?
So for me, there were two this is a very DC Batman heavy episode, but there are two comic books that were announced by DC Comics this week that I am super excited for. One's called Superman 78 and the other one's called Batman 89, and these are comic books set in the worlds of those respective films. What's really great about the Batman 89 comic is that several years ago, an artist named Joe Quinones had pitched a Batman 89 comic book series to DC set in the world of the Tim Burton movie starring Michael Keaton. He had concept art and everything. It was ultimately rejected, but several decades later, DC has finally come around and put Joe Quinones on the actual comic. So he's doing the art for Batman 89. Sam Hamm, who was the original screenwriter of the Batman 89 movie, is writing the comic. So this is very much...
Wow.
Yes, very much in the world of the Tim Burton movie. So I'm very excited. It's going to be a digital first comics in July and ultimately available in comic book stores in physical form later. What's really great about the Batman 89 book, and the Superman 78 book is very exciting as well. And this is not new. DC's been doing like revisiting their classic characters. Like there was a Wonder Woman 75 comic a couple years ago. Of course, it was the whole Batman 66 boom several years back. So
I mean, Superman 78 will have comic Marlon Brando in it? Or
yes,
something?
It'll have comic Chris Reeves, Marlon Brando, like the whole nine. It's going to be set in the world of Superman. Unlike the Batman verse, where there was only one official sequel, and then like Forever and the George Clooney ones are kind of like sideways sequels. Mm-hmm. This is going to, extrapolate the whole Michael Keaton Batman, and just in time for the Flashpoint movie, because Michael Keaton's coming back as Batman. So it's a good time to be a Michael Keaton Batman fan. But anyway, the big thing that I'm very excited about the Batman comic is that Joe Quinones had put some concept art for this version of the book online on his Twitter account. And some of the character designs are amazing. As a huge Batman 89 fan, I had all the action figures. His Bruce Wayne not only looks like Michael Keaton, but it looks like the Kenner version of Bruce Wayne he's like even wearing the turtleneck. And he's also like dipping into the well and bringing back a Joker gang since, Jack Nicholson's Joker is dead in the Batman Tim Burton movie universe. But there is a Joker gang, and I guess it's inspired by him, a la Batman Beyond. And the leader of said gang is none other than Prince from the Party Man video. If you recall, back in '89, Prince did all the music for the movie, and he created his own character for the music videos, Gemini, which was the split personality between like a Joker-esque side, and I guess the other side was just Prince, because it wasn't like the other side was Batman. But Gemini was this like character he created. The leader of the Joker gang is a full-on Prince double, so that's exciting. I don't know how he got the Paisley estate to to clear that, but we'll see if Prince shows up in the actual comic. But
we really, really hope they go as far as possible with that in the comic book, because that would be a great character to see. And again, that's one of those rare instances where our pop music and, our comic book superheroes like fuse together in like one glorious thing, which is when Prince did that soundtrack.
I mean, I know it's heresy to say this, but I think Batman is my favorite Prince album.
Well, okay.
Like the Sign of the Times is great, and have I
follow your bliss? Follow your bliss, Keith. Yeah, no, I mean that was a bold statement. So it's a bolder statement than I would go. But if it's for the, but if it's the most Batman-y one, I'll say, and for that, yes, it deserves a place in the night skyline.
Purple Rain, Batman, as far as Prince soundtracks go, it's definitely better than Under the Cherry Moon. That said, Dominic Ma, how can people find you on the internet?
Oh, I am just Dom Ma at DOMMAH.
Find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and follow The Nerd's Color at The Nerd's Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find us. Please give us a rating and review. Subscribe to us on youtube.com/The Nerd's Color. You can find this podcast as well as all of our videos, including Jamal's awesome interviews with celebrities and actors and influencers and creators. It's a great thing. Smash that subscribe button. Hit us up on patreon.com/nerdscolor. Support us on GoFundMe, TeePublic, everywhere you can support us. We appreciate that. And until next time, stay safe, everybody. Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard Knock Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard Knock Life, but not the chicken kind, more like the people in